Testing 1, 2, 3, ABC.
Welcome to Ordo Militaris Radio TV. We are once again with Brother Alexis Bonello, but this time as president of Ordo Militaris Catholicus. Welcome, brother.
Thank you, AJ. Always glad to be on Ordo Militaris Radio TV. A great apostolate of the Order, and I'm very glad to have this occasion to speak to you about the Order and our PMC in Montana, and how Catholics throughout the world can rally to the defense of persecuted Christians in all kinds of ways through our Order and with our Order.
What is this organization called Ordo Militaris?
Okay, so on August 1st, 2016, just a few days after the martyrdom of Father Jacques Hamel in France, when two Algerian terrorists, Muslims, slit his throat in front of the altar of his church during Mass. I was praying to our Lord, and in response, I believe he gave me this inspiration to start Ordo Militaris, telling me to seek the men to defend priests, churches, Catholics from jihadis. So by the end of that month, you and I had founded Ordo Militaris Inc., a private military corporation. We first founded it in Wyoming, and now it's headquartered in Montana. And we started a social media campaign to recruit Catholics who would be interested. In January that year later, we opened up memberships. The Ordo Militaris Catholicus, with the three words, means the Catholic Military Order. And it's an international association of Catholics pledged to defense of Christians who are persecuted out of hatred of Jesus Christ. Predominantly, they're targeted by Muslims today, but they could be targeted even by Marxists or racists. And Ordo Militaris, the company, is a Montana stock company, organized and authorized to sell 50,000 shares. And it is dedicated to promoting the security and defense of persecuted Christians. And its basic business plan is to raise the capital to start ventures in the United States and around the world to do this work in any of a variety of ways. So Ordo Militaris Catholicus is the international religious association, and anyone can become a member of that. Ordo Militaris Inc. is a U.S. corporation. I'm the president of that.
What struggles has the organization faced since its founding?
Well, in 2016, every day in the news, we were hearing about massacres, slaughters, bombings, murderings, all kinds of jihadi things. ISIS was wreaking havoc on Syria. It still is, now in Iraq. And we got a lot of strong support from Catholics and Christians around the world. Our association, you can be a member whether you're a Catholic or a Christian, or even a non-Christian who wants to defend Christians, because the purpose of the association is not the practice of the Catholic religion, but the defense of Christians who are being persecuted. And but at the same time, we ran into very, very strong opposition. Until the day President Trump won the election, we had trolls on us constantly, hundreds of trolls on social media, especially Twitter, which is really a Marxist platform. We were banned from Facebook. We've been banned 4 times from Ordo Militaris. I have personally been banned from Facebook for the crime of uploading a flag, a national flag, because they said that's not according to community standards. So our organization is definitely, we've been attacked by a group of Marxist homosexuals from Scotland, from Dublin, from a group of jihadi, pro-jihadi groups in London. One group that calls itself something like Against Hate or something like that. But by that they mean against Christians. And we have been had the door shut to us from radio stations, secular newspapers, and all Catholic newspapers. And EWTN, their general manager, actually sent me an email saying there would be grave international implications if we allowed you to place an ad in the Catholic National Register. And there is a united globalist effort to persecute Christians. ISIS, as we have to understand, was a creation of the CIA. It was funded, it was supplied, it was organized. Even Baghdadi, who was not a CIA agent, he was in US captivity for a long time, and the US purposely released him and allowed him to set up a jihadi group. The jihadis attack on clockwork in Britain whenever there's election, because they're part of the deep state. So they were closely protected by the entire Obama administration, who funded them. It's pretty clear now that the jihadi attack on the U.S. It's not consulate there in Libya was perpetrated by jihadi allies of the Obama administration, and those people were all allowed to die because Obama didn't want them to tell everyone about how he was funneling money and arms through Libya to Syria to ISIS. A lot of terrorists in the U.S. have literally been defended by the federal government or the courts or prosecutors with minimum sentences or lame excuses like he was mentally unstable. And we regularly get inquiries from U.S. government agents trying to find us guilty of something. I would say there's probably been 30 government agents on our backs over the last 4 years. And the amount of money they've spent just investigating us, we'd probably be able to build a military base on that alone. Generally speaking, there's a lot of bigotry out there that's behind it. If you're a Muslim group that wants to defend Muslims, probably no one would investigate you, because that's just politically incorrect to imply they might be terrorists. But Catholics are presumed to be terrorists because the Masons who rule the world today stole all their power from Christian monarchies or from Catholic monarchies. And so they want to keep us under their boot. And any attempt for Catholics to train and defend themselves is considered a greater threat than China and all Islamic terrorism. And they won't tell you that. We'll tell you that openly, and that's really what angers them. So we've had problems with online radio companies, our signals getting canceled, accounts getting shut down, no reason whatsoever. We've had a Diocese of Washington refused an ad in their paper because they said, if we put an ad from your organization in our paper, it would give people a wrong idea of what the gospel is all about. So the Marxists want you to think the gospel is about being massacred and genocided and smiling about it. They don't want you to think that maybe you should imitate the Catholic crusaders of old and take up arms and defend yourself and actually win a battle. So we've been persecuted on all sides from almost everyone. Even our few friends have been persecuted. Like, I have to thank publicly the Slaves of the Immaculate Heart in New Hampshire, who gave us our first public platform and allowed us to gain a lot of publicity. They have the hammers of persecution have fallen heavy on them because that's just not tolerable behavior, you know. And we want to thank my church, the one Catholic radio that gave us publicity right on the back. And I want to personally thank Faith Media there out of Kansas City, who interviewed me some months ago. Other than that, none of the main Catholic papers or the traditional groups have even admitted our existence. They actually are hiding our existence from you. They won't even say anything about it. We've had more than several hundred members, and they've all tried put like little comments on here and there, and they all get erased. There's an unwritten rule among Catholic media, traditionalist and conservative and liberal. As soon as you see a comment mentioning Ordo Militaris, erase it. It is just not allowed. And I think the reason why that is because we are truly Catholic. This inspiration that our Lord gave us is something that comes from the very founts of Catholicism. It is the true faith. It is the true approach to the right to bear arms, the right to defend yourself, and the right to take initiative. It's based on the concept that Christ is the king, and as members of his true church, we have the sovereign right to defend ourselves and to rule this world and to take initiatives to see that happen. So we're not about conquering territory, we're about defending individuals, but they fear that Catholics have any of these skills. And so we've had a lot of persecution, but we've also had a lot of help. I have to say that every single Catholic or non-Catholic veteran who is not a government agent, but who is truly interested in our organization, thinks we are the best organization out there that could possibly be. And they've looked around, they've worked for mercenary corporations, security companies, they all are cheering us on. They all think that we are the solution. So many guys come out of the US military, or even before they get out of the US military, they go, I want to join Ordo Militaris Catholicus as soon as you guys get operating. And this is not just US veterans. I hear it from veterans in South America. I hear it from veterans in Africa. I hear it from veterans in Europe. I even hear it from the French Foreign Legion veterans. So we are solidly Catholic, and that's why we're hated by everyone who is just even slightly compromised or who and somehow is controlled by those who don't want any even concept of Catholic restoration or Catholic defense. Because they know if we can learn to defend ourselves, then we can learn to restore Catholicism to Christendom. And that's, they hate all, because the people running this world are Satanists. So we've had a 4-year battle. It's mostly been financial. We've had banks shut down our accounts and attempt to steal all our assets. We've had people swindle us on our credit card. We've had people in state governments trying to steal our corporate information. We've had lawyers try to falsely sue us and swindle us with coercive threats. It's the whole panoply stuff's out there. We've had accountants betray us and give our personal information over to our enemies so that they could attempt to harass us. So I've been personally slandered in an academic journal in Scotland and had to threaten a publishing house in Europe not to calumniate me in their printing things. So it's unbelievable the amount of tax, and we haven't yet hired even a man, and we don't even yet own a gun. It's just we're proposing an idea. That's how much hate there is out there. Absolute pure hate. And this, what we have suffered is nothing. The real suffering is what Christians who are persecuted in Africa, in Asia, in the Mideast, that's what they suffer. Because their fathers and mothers, sisters, brothers, they were shot in the head. They had their throats slit. They were raped to death. They were chopped into pieces and fed to their mothers. They were buried alive. They had oil poured over them and were burnt alive. They were crucified. They were dismembered. They were enslaved. Their sons were raped by other men. They had their private parts cut off with knives and let to be bled to death. They were tried in public and put to death while all their friends. They committed the crime of drinking out of a cup that only a Muslim could touch. And so they were ripped apart by mad crowds. We have suffered nothing, not even a drop of the amount of hate there is for Christians out there. But all we did is said, we should defend these people who are being terribly persecuted, but not just talk about it. So we've had a tough 4 years, but by the grace of God, and only by the grace of God, AJ and I have not given up, and we're pushing forward ahead. We have not surrendered, and through this new apostle of Ordo Militaris Radio Net, we're getting the message out without paying others. We're just doing it on our own. And through my work at fromrome.info, I try to do the same thing here from Rome.
Could you respond to what is pacifism and how this has hurt the response by Catholics?
Yeah, so pacifism is a completely alien concept, never had anything to do with Catholicism, okay? Pacifism is the refusal ever to defend yourself or to use force to defend yourself or the innocent. Pacifism is an evil, fake virtue. It pretends to holiness. but it's not holy itself. It attempts to twist the gospel, like when Christ says to the apostles in the garden, after Peter cuts off the ear of the servant of the high priest, our Lord tells him to put his sword away, and he heals the ear of the servant. They try to say that means Christ doesn't want us ever to use the sword. Well, that's just false. It's just Christ was on his way to do his passion. He was involved in the very sacred act of redeeming the world, and that act meant the healing and the liberty of all. And by what he did intervening there was to teach that that's the highest. For his sake, he didn't want anyone to intervene, because he was going to bear our sins and take them to the cross. But by Christ dying on the cross, he didn't want us to believe that we should all think that we should let ourselves be martyred. Okay, so here we have to make a distinction between the Catholic doctrine of martyrdom. That is the greatest grace you could ever have, to be killed out of hatred for Christ. However, that is something that God wills to give. That is not something that we can promote. Okay, there have been many people say, I want to be a martyr, and went into a dangerous situation and were killed, and they didn't die a martyr because they cursed their enemies or gave up the faith or did some vile thing on their way to their death, or didn't forgive their enemies. And we certainly can't say, well, if they're all being slaughtered and they're Christian, at least they'll go to heaven, so we don't have to intervene. That's even more diabolic. Okay, the doctrine of martyrdom is we thank God if certain Catholics or Christians in the state of persecution should resist with such fortitude and show holiness in the moment. Okay, but that doesn't mean we should ever allow those situations to take place. When we have the money, the capability, and we can generate the military power, the security forces necessary to prevent those things from happening. Because if we don't, and Catholics are martyred, they go to heaven, but we will go to hell for our negligence. Because you can go to hell not only for what you do, but for what you don't do. And Christianity in modern times is 1.6 billion. There's 1.6 billion Christians. We certainly have the wealth, the numbers, and the know-how to see that Christians don't get persecuted anywhere. So if they're being persecuted anywhere, that is our failure. We're going to have to explain that to Almighty God when we go to the grave. Why didn't you do anything to protect my people? Okay, and that's the situation. Why people don't do anything about it? Why they're controlled. The idea of pacifism is mostly it's a Marxist construct. It's an instrument of narrative control, and therefore of groupthink, and therefore of psychological control. It's to keep Catholics repressed, so that you think that being Christians is submitting to Freemason Masonic world governance. Okay, that's what it's all about, and so it's a complete lie. Catholicism is really the true Christian teaching is greater love no man hath than to lay down his life for his brother. And to lay down his life in Latin really means to put your life at risk. In other words, just like when you're playing poker, you ante up, you put that money at risk because you could lose that hand in cards. That's what lay down your life means. It means you put your life at risk not knowing if you're going to win, but you're going to risk it anyhow because of your love for your fellow brother in Christ. Okay, that's the true Christian doctrine. And so consequently, that includes all military men, all police, all security forces who risk their life to uphold law, justice, and to defend Christians. Okay, it's a great thing what the military, the police, security forces do is to uphold true justice. Okay, but it's a far greater thing if Christians practice those same military arts, but now to defend Christians from persecution. That is the height. Okay, it's not as high as being a martyr, but it's right next to it, because you are deliberately and intentionally risking your life to defend someone who is your brother in Christ. So pacifism is a big mistake. The real Catholic notion is we should all be willing to risk our life to defend our brother in Christ.
How has the social media ego hurt the response?
Yeah, social media egoism. Okay, so this is a term I invented. I said, AJ, ask me about this, because I graduated at University of Florida in culture and anthropology. So cultural anthropology, we study what are the values, systems, thoughts by which people live in their society, and determine what is important to themselves. So social egoism is the spirit by which someone goes on social media or starts a career in which he seeks publicity or he promotes publicity and he becomes a personality representing this or that. But social egoism is now all over social media, especially YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and it gets a person to start acting for very specific and limited goals. And nearly all the personalities out there are affected by it in some way. So they want to keep up their image. They want to have more likes, more favors. They want everyone to think well of them, but they want to raise money for themselves. Nearly everyone on social media who's very popular starts raising money for himself. Very few actually out there raising money to help charity. So unlike Ordo Militaris radio or from Rome, info or channels that we do for our order, where we raise only funds to help others. These people are raising money so that they can pay their mortgage on their 6-bedroom house, that they can move to Scottsdale, Arizona, that they can buy that third Mercedes Benz. And you can tell because as the years go on, they get more professional. They start wearing gold jewelry, and I'm not just talking about Catholics. This is all over. But the problem with social egoism or social media egoism is it's me, give me, give me, give me, give me, give me. If you say, can we do a show about persecuted Christians and do a fundraiser for them? They're like, they'll never say these words, but this is what they're thinking. I'm not here for anyone else. I'm here for me. If I raise money for other people, the money won't come to me. Okay, so social egoism has created a whole generation of talking heads that are very, very unlike Catholics of old, or even Christian ministers of old, who, if they got up, they're going to raise money to help the poor, or the persecuted, or the suffering, or those starving of famine. It wasn't about themselves. So you could, if you're going to do if you want to make a comparison, social media egoism turns a Catholic or a Christian who's on social media into kind of like a minister of a glass cathedral church, where everything is about himself. He comes out there with music and he's dancing all over the place, and it's all his image, and all the money goes to himself. Okay, and he's just enriching himself on it, and that's not what Christians should be doing. Okay, it's nothing wrong with that. You're running a business on the internet and you're doing information service. Nothing wrong with that. But charity obliges us to open our hearts to the poor, even in our work. And if our work is publicity, then we should tithe our time during the year. If you make 365 videos a year, you should give 1/10 of those to raising money for charities, because that is the greatest gift you can do. God has given you fame. He's given you power. He's given you influence. Now you need to give it back to him to help him, okay, and help his poor and help his sheep. So this has been our biggest blocks, because we ask these people to talk about it, and they're just, as the phrase is in English, American English, they're tightwads. They'll help anyone else? No, it's not in their heart at all. But if someone says something bad about them on internet, they do a whole hour video. Someone said something bad about me. So we need a new generation of much more mature adult people on social media. And maybe social media doesn't want people like that. And maybe social media won't allow those people to exist, because Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, you start saying the truth, they'll crush you. Okay. And so maybe these people are afraid for that. But when Christians are being persecuted at the levels they are, since 2000, it's been more than 1 million Christians who have been genocided or displaced, at least, I think. And it's going on. So in our second hour today, you're going to hear about our weekly report on terrorism, Ordo Militaris Radio. It's not stopped. It's not. ISIS hasn't been defeated. ISIS has come back. Mm-hmm. Christians aren't pouring into the U.S. as refugees. Trump has shut down any ability of Christians to come into America. So you have to stop reading the tweets and start reading the news. The reality is not the way it's being presented to you.
Yeah. This one even comes from my dad and a few others. So I thought, To get a clearer picture, is Ordo Militaris similar to the secular private military company portrayed in 13 Hours?
Okay, so a secular private military company, like the one you saw in 13 Hours, the movie about the attack on the U.S. compound there in Libya, is a security company, basically, or heavily armored, designed for close support or actual open military activities. And each of their men are highly paid. They're specialists. They're usually veterans. They're probably paid 120 to 250,000 a year, each of them. Okay. Men of usually great character, great technical military ability, and they usually work under government contract. So those men there were under government contract to be assistants for security, because in certain places of the world, the U.S. cannot put military forces in the streets, but they can hire a private company to be there and help them. So in many ways, we're similar, except they're the thing without the soul. Okay, that is, they're doing what things we would do, but they're not doing them for Jesus Christ or for his people, and they're in the pay of governments that are atheistic or Masonic or completely secular. And they're not trained in any kind of Christian values or engagement. And they're also trained to be subordinate to highly controlled command structure. So as you saw in that film, they could have done a lot more if they were allowed to take initiative. But they weren't allowed to take initiative because Obama didn't want initiative. He wanted that compound and everyone in it dead. And he engineered a situation would that happen. And he refused them to act so that they couldn't. But they took initiative anyhow, and they risked their lives because they didn't understand the bigger picture. We understand that picture. We have no intention of ever taking a government contract because we don't want to be used as pawns in someone else's game. Okay. So, and we would train our men in the Christian faith to fight as Christian soldiers and to always take initiative, but always be highly moral and use common sense. So I won't get into what happened there and tactical mistakes that are made, anything like that, but we are similar, but we will have a Christian soul, and our men will wear the cross, and we will serve to defend Christians, not defend political targets or serve military governments. So for that reason, we have just as highly qualified men who'd want to serve with us. So I have to say that those men who died there were extremely brave, and the ones who suffered are extremely heroic men. And I would believe anything they said over anyone in the U.S. government any day. But unfortunately, they had their trust in the government misused. They were misused, and they weren't told the whole truth, and they weren't allowed to do everything they should have done. But they did, under the limitations they had, they did a wonderful job. And I think some key members of them are Catholic and have come out and spoken about what happened. And I praise them, although I don't know them by name. And if any of them ever listen to the show and you want to come on Ordo Militaris Radio, you'll be an honored guest. So yeah, we would be similar, except the things are this: is they're a U.S. company that got a contract with the U.S. government and therefore had permission from the Libyan government under the U.S. government to be there. We would found a company. You know, if we were doing work in Nigeria, we would found a company in Nigeria which would hire our men. Our American company would not operate in Nigeria, nor would we send material supplies in Nigeria, because if we did that, then we'd have to have ITAR, and we want to avoid that.
Oh, the old question. Is it legal?
Yeah, well, if it wasn't legal, AJ and I would be under arrest already in a federal prison, right? The Secretary of State in Montana certainly would not allow us to found a company and sell stock, and nor would the Security Exchange Commission allow us to open an account with them and file information about our private offering. And nor would the FBI said, we've checked you out and there's nothing wrong with you. So, you know, I can understand where that's coming from because no one's doing it. But it also comes from the psychological manipulation on which Christians are. the fact that we're actually proposing this, which no one has proposed since the Middle Ages, really, makes people think that it must be illegal, because why isn't anyone else thinking of it? And everyone's been beaten down by pacifism, the French eras of the French Revolution, submit, 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 or the Masonic era that religion has nothing to do with security and defense, the church has to be disarmed, blah, 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 blah. Christians should be glad that they're being persecuted and going to heaven as martyrs, blah, 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 blah. That they think, boy, that we must be illegal. No, we're not. We're absolutely legal. And the fact that we are legal, though, when AJ and I founded this company, said, well, that we are legal, now people were able to finance what we're doing and get it under show. So we've removed all the legal boundaries. We've studied the whole problem. And so, yeah, we're perfectly legal. And we're very, see, the whole Christian ethic is to be legal, is to obey, to obey all just and lawful laws. So in the United States, we'll scrupulously follow state and federal laws for gun ownership, bearing guns, the keeping and storing of guns, ammunition, stuff like that. And the same in any other country we might be in. So yeah, we're perfectly legal.
You covered it a little bit, but maybe go into it some more. Why hasn't the Catholic papers, radio shows, TV shows constantly having the order on?
Yeah, okay. Well, part of it is institutional problem. Most Catholic publications exist to serve an institution and raise money for them. So your diocesan paper exists to raise money for the diocese. And most bishops so tightly control fundraising in their diocese that they don't even allow a missionary to come to their diocese and preach about the poor in Africa unless the bishop has given them permission. And then it's very restrictive. Mm-hmm. And the conditions are, you know, I remember one year a priest came to a parish and I was talking to him afterwards. He goes, I can't even get the collection that was taken up for me after my homily. I have to negotiate with the parish, and the bishop has to said I could only get so much of it. If it exceeds this amount of money, the others goes to the diocese. Unbelievable avarice. That's part of the problem. The other problem is they don't exist to encourage your sanctification. That's not the purpose of most Catholic journalism. Most Catholic journalism is just to inform you. So they want to maintain neutral, not take any sides, and they don't really want to advocate anything. However, they don't even take advertisements from our corporation, and that is because they're probably so much infiltrated by Marxists or modernists or political agendas that an ad from us they wouldn't. Ideologically and psychologically, as one YouTuber says, they're over-socialized in the sense that they become socialists. They couldn't intellectually wrap their mind around why Christians should defend one another with guns. Okay, that is the absolute verboten topic. You got to remember, the left doesn't want anyone who, with one hand, is grasping a Bible and the other's grasping a gun, because those people are the enemies of the Marxist revolution. So since the Marxists control either directly or indirectly, that is either the institutions or the people in them, nearly all these publications, they cannot even accept an ad, even if someone in it does. Now, take for example, we wanted to place an ad in the National Catholic Register in the fall of 2016, and I made a request, and it was denied, as I said before, by the General Council of EWTN. But I heard later that there was like a rebellion in EWTN. Why aren't we talking about persecuted Christians? Why aren't we even opening this up? So eventually they did start talking about persecuted Christians. But like 6 months later, when they started to actually raise money for persecuted Christians, what do? They raised money for the Knights of Columbus, which, okay, Knights of Columbus does do some charitable work for those who are persecuted, but it doesn't provide security and defense. So, and their video that I saw just the other day on YouTube from the summer of 2017 has gotten 69 views in 3 years, where any video we produce gets hundreds of views in the first month. So that's EWTN with all its hundreds of millions of dollars. People understand what a false appeal is when it's false. I think if they put us on, it would be like wildfire, the support we'd get. And they just don't want that much money going to the cause that we have. Now the EWTN merged with Achi Prensa, which is kind of left-wing Latin American news agency. They're even more controlled by the Dom. We have to do our own video TV channel.
Kind of wish we'd see if we could find a way to reach out to Father Mitch Pacwa. He's one of the good Jesuits. He's like, I'd rather die with my boots on.
There's a lot of excellent people who do programs in EWTN, but because they have a contract with EWTN, they can always be threatened not to even speak about an organization like our own. So it's sad, but that's the reality.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Talk about those who hobnob with the nobility.
Okay, so, you know, wanting to, I guess everyone who's not of noble blood might at some time think, hey, it would have been great to have been a noble, okay? Because there are very few people can trace their lineage back to the nobility of Europe like yourself, so like you can, AJ. I myself, peasants, you know, my grandfather was found on a doorstep. My others were peasants for centuries in Sicily, so there's no noble blood in me, I can say that. But some people aspire to, you know, okay, well, if I'm not noble, I don't have noble blood, let me hobnob with the nobility, you know. So they join heraldic Bourbons or, you know, this noble family and that, and they travel around the world and they get all these, they pay their $2,500 to become a knight of Malta. They pay other fees and they become a knight of this or that. And I know one guy who became Grand Knight of some African kingdom that doesn't exist, but once did, you know. And well, it's almost like, that's not true nobility, okay? True nobility, other than having the blood, is having the virtues of the nobleman, which is chivalry, okay? So if you want to live as a man of nobility, meaning in the sense of virtue, a man of chivalry, what greater thing than to imitate the Crusaders of old? And what is the way to do that today? To risk your life providing defense and security services to Christians who are persecuted. And you could do that anyway. You could found your own Ordo Militaris. You don't have to do it with us. But that is true nobility. So I would encourage you not to waste your time seeking after the appearances of nobility, but to be truly noble. And likewise, to anyone who out there who might be truly noble, you know, what's the purpose of keeping up all the accoutrements of your ancestors if you don't practice the virtues of your ancestors who were quick to pick up the sword to defend persecuted Christians against Islamic invasion, or you might have many ancestors who fought in the Crusades in Palestine or Egypt or North Africa. Why not imitate that virtue instead of just, you know, talking about it all day long or wishing it once was? Or, you know, because that's true nobility. And that will really bring honor to your family and to your house.
Yeah. What about these Catholics who use the term crusader for show and just want to talk and not imitate the Holy Crusaders?
Yeah, okay, so probably, I don't know where this comes from. It probably comes from the video game genre, because there's a lot of video games now about the Crusades and the Crusaders and knights and things like that. So as these young boys grow up, you know, they don't know anything else because they didn't spend their youth reading history books. They'd spend it playing video games. And so they start admiring some parts about it. And while they go on social media and they use, you know, Godfrey of Bouillon as their nickname and put up a shield or something and constantly tweeting out Deus Vult. And they love watching movies about the Crusades or medieval fighting and stuff, but they never get real, okay? Because they've already not even yet become men because they're still in front of their video game like a little boy, okay? They didn't go out into the real world, learn how to fight, learn how to shoot a gun, learn how to ride a horse, join the military, you know, and because those are the real deeds of manhood, or become a monk, I should say, or become a priest. So the kind of caught in the delusion of the appearances of the reality rather than the reality. And manhood, an essential work of manhood, is leaving aside the appearances of manhood and doing the real deeds of manhood. And in my
Brother Alexis, are you still there?
You there, AJ?
Yeah.
Okay, you froze for me a while. Maybe I froze for you too.
Oh, yeah.
What was the last thing you heard me say?
How they like to talk about just being crusaders and sitting in front of their game stations or doing special crusader conferences, but never actually do anything.
Okay, so I guess maybe someone's listening in and didn't like my comments. So I said that there's a difference between being a boy and being a man. Being a boy, you engage in things that in the appearances of manhood. You play war, you play this, you play that, you imagine this, you read books about some great deeds of old, and you dream daydreams. That's the life of a boy. The life of a man, he does those things. So he learns to ride a horse, shoot a gun, he becomes a member of the military, he becomes a priest, becomes a monk. He actually does the things that pertain to manhood. He just doesn't dream about them. Unfortunately, with the disorder of modern life, kids getting stuck in front of their video game things. They spend their whole youth playing video games. They may play their video games all the way into the adulthood, and they never become men because they never go from appearances to reality. They get stuck with appearances because their mind is so overwhelmed by the fascination of the computer false reality that they never go on to real reality, and they never become men. So if you want to be a man, you have to do the deeds of manhood, and our organization is all about that. We're not about talking about helping people, okay? Even though without funding, that's all we yet so far can do. But with funding, we're going to be about defending people, okay? The deeds of manhood, and that's what our organization, our order, and our PMC in Montana is about.
Some might think and have asked, this is important work. Why not get a government contract now? You get the funds for now and then leave it later. How would you respond?
Well, you know, if you don't know much about the government or the politics involved in military contracts with the US government or with any government, I can understand you might think that. But that is a completely unrealistic view because these organizations are all Masonic, they're deeply secularist, and they're extremely bigoted and anti-Catholic. They would never give a Catholic organization. Matter of fact, I was talking with someone who is very familiar with US government contracts, and he would say you would have to take the word Catholic out of all your literature to get a contract with the US government. So we're not going to give up our identity for the sake of money. That's ridiculous. The Catholics in the United States have more money than the federal government and more wealth. We're just going to appeal directly to Catholics and Christians and for their investment and for their financial support. And we can achieve it without giving up our identity. So why should we give up our identity? Will that delay it some? Yeah, it will delay it some. But nevertheless, it won't corrupt it. It will keep it true to its mission. So we're not, and the reason why we can do that is neither AJ and I are in this to get wealthy. Because if we weren't to get wealthy, we'd sell out all our morals and ethics, run for a government contract, and be like another member of the military industrial establishment, a whore to the government, to government contracts, which has no morality. And what would the purpose of even founding the organization be if That's what it was. So the reason why we
Hold on, folks. We are having way too many difficulties here.
don't do that should show you a demonstration out there, because we're not going to give up our identity for the sake of money, even if it takes. You hear me, AJ?
Yeah, that was weird.
Okay, so yeah, there was like a little interruption there. So okay, so it shouldn't surprise if we're going to get interruptions during this program on Ordo Militaris Catholics, because the NSA and the CIA have units designed to suppress the social media publicity of organizations they want suppressed. And we've known about that for a while. We've had a former member of the CIA tell us about it, the program is existing, and we know we're targeted. So, you know, these things happen. So.
Okay. What is it that Ordo Militaris needs right now to get operational?
We need investments, okay? I want to thank all maybe 250 individuals over the last 4 years have pledged for once or for a few months or for a year or two, some small capital irrigation to the company, which has allowed us to stay in existence and do the small amount of publicity we did. So in the last 4 years, we must have raised around, it must be now around $70,000. Okay, which sounds like a lot of money, but over 4 years. And we've never made a profit. We've always taken a loss. But we're not bankrupt yet. And we're not in debt because we don't take loans. But what we need is investment, because to create an esprit de corps, to create the entity that we want to create, we need a training camp where we can train men as Christian warriors, a thing that has not been done in centuries, okay? And we need land to do that on. We need funding for the expenses, the military trainers, the equipment. Even if we were to just rent an entire hotel for 3-4 months and train all our men in national parks, at shooting ranges, or on rivers, in public places where you could do public things, and confine the actual military things to places where you can use guns. You know, a program like that would still probably run $250,000 to do it right, you know. And even if we were going to charge tuition, okay, our plan is get young recruits, don't charge them tuition, but pay our military trainers and all the equipment so they have what they are, and then the young men would pledge to serve with us for 2 years for just room and board. And we'd start them off their career with training and certification on how to use all kinds of weapons and stuff like that. But that takes assets, and there are a lot of Catholics who know about us. Many of those, however, probably 80%, don't have money to invest with us. They're not rich people. They're poor people, and they have strong faith precisely because they're poor and they haven't sold themselves out to the world. We address our appeals for investment to that 20% of Catholics who have 50, 100, a million, several million invested on their pension fund or in the stock markets and various kinds of securities, because you know, they have money in Microsoft, Apple, they have money in Amazon, they have money in different companies around the world, or oil companies in Texas. They have it in diversified portfolio. We appeal to them to consider making part of their portfolio an investment in Ordo Militaris, okay? And that's what we really need now, because we need the assets. So a military camp of even modest size would take a $5 million investment, okay? The land is up for sale. The supplies are easy to put together. The laws all allow it. It's just the capital. And we know that if we got a camp up and running, one that would maybe take $5 million investment, we could generate sufficient income for that to give our investors a good return on their stock. So though our stock is privately traded, it's not on a stock exchange. Nevertheless, we have and can pay dividends. And we're in a state where the dividends we pay, we can pay dividends even if we take a loss. So we're geared so that the investor who wants to do something good with his money can invest with us and still get a return. And I think it's a pretty good option because we're not like most companies. You buy Coca-Cola, your money might go to a jet for the president or his severance package of $2.5 million or $250 million because they got to get rid of him because he's an absolute nincompoop. Your investment with us will go to capital investments. It won't go to operating expenses. So I think it's a very unusual and less risky offer from that point of view. Of course, we are a security company, and there is risk in that, and we are something new. It's a new venture. But the history of the world is not going to change until Catholics who have the power to invest in something totally different, okay? Because the history of the world will not change unless the history of investment changes, okay? Mm-hmm. And a lot of Catholics who could invest, they've known about us for 4 years, so maybe now is the time, because we told you 4 years ago, you have to defend Christians in the Mideast or terrorism is going to come to America. And people said, well, no, that's an exaggeration. But terrorism has now come to America. That chop zone there in the Northwest, was it Portland? Yeah. That was a terrorist zone in America. The authorities were doing nothing about it. And don't think that what we've just seen or are now seeing is just a phenomenon that's going to blow over after the election. It has set a precedent. The left has known to set the precedent. And now they're arming and preparing for the next wave of terrorism that might break out in 1 or 2 years, but it's going to be far worse, okay? Because what the left needs to do is murder about 1/6 of everyone in the United States, the people that oppose them, so that all states become democratic states, okay? And especially if they lose the next election, we will be hit with a series of waves of terrorism in the United States, no longer promoted by ISIS, but ISIS might be involved. It's going to be Black Lives Matter and Antifa and other democratic groups, because they see now that the police, the governors, even the federal government, all hesitated. They all showed that they were afraid, okay? It wasn't immediately they were crushed. Matter of fact, they were allowed to flourish, and they're being promoted by corporate America. So an investment with Ordo Militaris can establish a training camp where hundreds and thousands of Catholic and Christian men can train to fight together to defend their towns, their neighborhoods, their churches, their cities, and their states. Because the wave of terrorism hasn't ended. It's going to get even worse. And there's no organization out there to train the citizen, okay? And it's not enough to rely on the one vet that lives on your street, okay? And you don't know what to do, okay? So if we have a base, we can have a training course where American citizens from anywhere in the country can come and take that course and become a leader in their neighborhood for the cause of justice and, as I say, the American way. And that's the service we'd love to do. No other corporation do it, because every other corporation would just charge you tons of money, and they would get the pressure on them. See, any private military corporation that gets government contracts will be severely pressured never to establish such a training camp, because the deep state wants the Marxist revolution. And that's why they're always on our back, because they know it's perfectly legal, we can do it. And we can totally change the balance of power on the streets of America if people invest with us. And we found not just one training camp. I'd love to have a training camp in as many states as possible so that we can train hundreds of thousands of American citizens every year. Because then the revolution will not succeed in America. And they come to your neighborhood and they're all going to get it. So this is the way of defending not only Christians around the world, but even in your own neighborhood. That's why it's not just a prudent investment, it's the best investment you can make. Because what value does it have with all your investments if Black Lives Matter can come to your house one day and shoot you dead, and the police aren't going to come and defend? You've seen the police aren't going to come to defend you. Even if you do take a gun to defend yourself, like that family there in Kansas, Kansas City, in a historic home, the district attorney will come the next day and take all your guns away from you. So if you invest in a company like ours that's designed in training the general public, then when the district attorney comes, he's going to find, 10, 20 men, they're armed, and they're going to say, whose guns do you want to take away first? So you got to show, you got to have the manliness to make the right decisions in the right time. And now we are at a crucial point in U.S. history. Now is the time to do something like this for the sake of the defense of even our own country, even though we are organized to defend Christians everywhere around the world.
Does the order need an ITAR?
Okay, so ITAR is the U.S. Congress, and I think it was the 30s, passed the law limiting the export of military hardware, and then it was extended, I think, in the 50s to even defense and security services. So no U.S. corporation outside of the U.S. can do anything to help anyone defend anyone, unless they have permission from the Department of State called ITAR, and they have to register all the individuals leaving the country in their name and all that stuff. It's highly politically controlled, and that's how the deep state can prevent any group overseas that the deep state wants to persecute from being defended. So no, we're not going to see ITAR because we're not going to allow the deep state to tell us what to do. We get around it because we, as a U.S. company, we can invest in companies anywhere around the world, and those companies can provide the security and defense services, and those companies can even hire Americans. So we, that way, legally obviate all the controls, and that's our business plan for international operations.
How can Catholic vets and all Christian veterans help the order?
Okay, so the first thing you can do is pray to the Lord Jesus Christ that we get the help we need to defend his people. That's the first thing. And the second thing you can do is let everyone know about us, especially those men in your neighborhood who can invest. And the third thing you can do is let all the Christian veterans you know about us, because they're a great network. Once the word gets among them, it really spreads around. Let everyone know about us. Encourage people who can't invest to become a member of Ordo Militaris Catholicus by a small monthly pledge. You can pledge $1 a month. You can pledge $8.50 a month. You could pledge $25 a month, or $50 a month, or $100 a month. We have a whole series of different categories. In our Ordo Militaris, we accord a dignity, so you can pledge as a lay member, a herald, a squire, a knight, a baron, a duke. Okay, we have different categories. That's one way to help us. Another way to help us is come to Ordo Militaris Ordo-Militaris.us. Go to our shop. We have some merchandise you can buy that can help us. You can acquire a Lepanto flag. You can help our apostle at Ordo Militaris Radio TV by making a pledge at the bottom of any page of this radio station where you're seeing this video. Those are all the different ways you can help us. You can volunteer, okay? So AJ and I, we haven't taken any salary, and we've promoted the order for 4 years. So you can volunteer like that, and on a weekly basis, make videos or write a blog and tell everyone about the order and how to help out. We'd love to have a whole horde of volunteers to do that. If we had 200 people doing that, that would make all our work a lot easier. Because we do long videos here at Militaris Radio. You can take out 5 minutes, 10 minutes and talk about it and spread it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You know, you can get the message out. You can volunteer to try to convince people to sell our stock, okay? So you can talk to businessmen about entering in some kind of relationship with. We want to start an international network of businessmen. We call it the Blue Cross Network, and that is one way as businessmen can help. So there's all kinds of ways to help. You first have to want to help and make that decision. I'm going to dedicate myself in some way to defending Christians and help this organization out. So we're very transparent. You can call our offices in Helena, Montana at 1-406-299-9260. Leave a message. I'll get back to you. You'll get a personal call from me, the president, and I'll answer any questions you have. I do that even for government agents. They ask me any other questions, and I tell everyone the same thing because we're absolutely transparent. We're not hiding anything. Those are all the different ways you can help. If you're a military vet and you'd like to serve with us, you can. We have a page on signing up at Ordo-Militaris.us. read the information, go to the bottom of the page. Send me those 5 things in the mail. And because we put together a file of men who'd be willing to work with us once we're able to do that. There's all different ways you can help that way. If you go to our main site, ordo-militaris.us, it suggests all the different ways you can help out. And we appreciate it, and we really need it, okay? So this is something that we can do. Christians of America can do it. You've now seen all the companies are against you. So take your money out of all those companies and put it in companies that are really promoting Christianity. And I hope you consider Ordo Militaris Inc. as a possible investment, because with even a few investors, we would start operating, okay? Because some people have a substantial amount of monies. I have written someone who's 89 billion, and I written someone who had a $500 million. Unfortunately, they didn't listen to my appeals. Any one of them could have easily, like that, got us operating. So that's why I say the first thing is prayer, that God might send the Holy Spirit into the hearts of men with the money to be truly noble of heart, okay? Because this is true nobility, defending Christians, and start doing something now, because you can throw all the money away at political candidates. You can throw all your money away at any other endeavor, but it's not going to stop persecution. Feeding someone, clothing someone, housing someone or getting someone in the legislature is not going to stop persecution. What's going to stop persecution is having armed men in front of the people who are targeted, because then there won't be persecutors, because they're not going to dare come near, as we see in all these cases of vandalism. They're always vandalizing a place that's not protected, okay? Because these people are cowards. And the same thing in terrorism. Terrorists will never attack a hard target. They'll always go for a soft, undefended target. Those hotels that were bombed in Sri Lanka a year ago at Easter time, none of them had security, okay? So security is important everywhere nowadays, and especially if you're in a city where there's high amounts of political tension. And so even if you are a group of businessmen in your town, the best investment would be, I think, with Ordo Militaris, because once we have hundreds of men's training with us, then Christian security companies can be founded all around the country in every state, and those men who've trained with us can then be defending your stores, your towns, and assisting your local police, or in any manner of ways. So security is the best investment, because it's the best defense.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great first show today. Thank you all for listening, watching. Please share, like, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, BitChute. If you can, follow us on Mixcloud. We still have 0 followers there. But you listen to all of our shows on there, so give us a follow.
Yeah, and please share these programs. It helps us a lot. That's one great way to start a thing. And try to start up a discussion with your friends about Ordo Militaris. Break through that media narrative control that is like a high, solid wall against this, precisely because there is so much hate out there against Christians. So if you love Jesus Christ, then you will want to help his people when they're being persecuted. And that's what we're all about at Ordo Militaris Catholicus and Ordo Militaris Inc.
Hopefully everything will be a little bit better later on today when we return for our part 2 of our show. So this is Ordo Militaris Radio TV signing off for now. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.